Welcome to the meeting of the San Francisco Public Library Commission for December 16th, 2021. The time is 4:30 p.m. I am Margot Schaub and I serve as the Library Commission Affairs Analyst. As an ongoing reminder, due to the COVID-19 health emergency, the Library Commission meeting is being held virtually, and members will participate in the meeting remotely pursuant to orders issued by the mayor and current public health recommendations, while allowing the public to observe and address the commission. Commissioners will attend the meeting through video conference and participate to the same extent as if they were physically present. Public comment will be available for each agenda item. Members of the public can observe the meeting using the Webex system by following the link in the library's event calendar or by calling local 1-415-655-0001 and entering the access code for the meeting. Today's meeting access code is 2495-866-4085. Attendees wishing to offer public comment should wait to raise their hand until public comment for that specific item has been called. Attendees raising their hands before public comment is called run the risk of having their hands lowered in the normal conduct of the meeting. To make public comment, when connected by phone, please raise your hand by dialing *3 when public comment is called to be added to the queue for the agenda item you intend to comment on. Individuals joining by Webex should click the raise hand button in the lower right-hand portion of the participant panel in order to be added to the queue. Best practices to make public comments are to call from a quiet location, speak clearly and slowly, and turn down your television or radio. Each commenter will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Anyone wishing to make public comment on an agenda item will remain on mute until their line is open. Chris McCullough from Media Service Operations will facilitate this meeting and assist in moderating public comment. Chris will call upon members of the public by name or by caller number to prompt each attendee who wishes to provide public comment. I will now commence with roll call. Library commissioners in attendance are President Wardell Giarduzzi, Vice President Pete Wong, Commissioners Lee, Mall, Ono, Wolf. We expect Commissioner Lopez shortly. You're on mute.
Thank you. It's so great to have you here this evening. Give me a moment here. I am toggling between my electronic pages here, and I just want to make sure I have the right one on my screen. Just had it opened, and I just closed it. So just bear with me as I pull up the document that I had opened. Here it is. Thank you so much. So I want to welcome you to this December 16th meeting of the San Francisco Public Library Commission. I'm going to start our meeting by reading our Ramaytush Ohlone land acknowledgement. The San Francisco Public Library acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that the Ramaytush Ohlone understand the interconnectedness of all things and have maintained harmony with nature for millennia. We honor the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples for their enduring commitment to Warep, Mother Earth. As the indigenous protectors of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. We recognize to respectfully honor the Ramaytush peoples, we must embrace and collaborate meaningfully to record indigenous knowledge and how we care for San Francisco and all its people. Again, I want to thank you to the members of the public who are attending with us, meeting remotely. We miss you all so very much, but we will still continue to meet in these remote spaces. And if you have not done so already, all the materials for this meeting are available for download on the Library Commission page of the library's website, which is sfpl.org. Now, we have a total of 7 agenda items on this evening's agenda. As a reminder, attendees wishing to offer public comment should wait to raise their hand until public comment is called for that specific item. Attendees raising their hands too soon run the risk of having their hands lowered in the normal conduct of the meeting. So we will begin our meeting with item number 1, a discussion and possible action on a resolution to adopt findings to allow teleconference meetings under California Government Code Section 54953-E. The governor's pandemic order on remote meetings expired on September 30th. Recently enacted state legislation AB 361 allows boards and commissions to hold remote meetings under certain conditions. Policy bodies, such as the Library Commission, must adopt findings to continue holding meetings remotely. And now we'll move. So I think, I just want to make sure that I'm going in the right order here.
Yes, Madam President.
Okay, so now we'll move into our public comment before our commission discussion on this item. Members of the public who wish to provide general public comment should now raise their hands in order to be added to the queue. If you are using the Webex interface, click the raise hand button in the lower right-hand portion of the screen. If you have called into Webex, dial in number at 415-655-0001. Please press *3 to line up to speak. Operations personnel are there. Any commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there is one commenter in the queue.
Thank you. Would you put the commenter through, please?
Are you going to tell me when I should start?
So sorry. Anonymous call-in user, 3 minutes. That's you. Your 3 minutes begins now.
This is Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association, Library Users 2004 at yahoo.com. And we can also be reached at P.O. Box 170544, San Francisco, California, 94117-0544. With respect to this rather lengthy determination, which you are supposed to be making, you haven't even read it. I think that's wrong. Pretty much everything else is open now. I'm not sure how long that will last, and we certainly want to have safety for everybody. But, for example, under the resolved section, it says, as described above, the state of California and the city remain in a state of emergency. And it talks about the continued state of presumed emergency, but the mayor has lifted some of the restrictions in the city. And I think that ought to be discussed and as to what it means and how it affects the Library Commission's meetings. The last whereas before the resolved section says, whereas the San Francisco Library Commission has met remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic and can continue to do so in a manner that allows public participation and transparency, well, the Sunshine Task Force, on a complaint that we brought, found that the library was violating the law and did not provide public comment opportunity as it should have done under the law. For all that time, basically, and did not, as it were, clear the library until a very recent subcommittee meeting at which they were presumably satisfied that the library had done some basic changes that improved matters. I think you need to look strongly at how you're providing public comment opportunities. I think, for example, the instructions are way unnecessarily complicated, and so is your procedure. I don't know that there's a need to mute anybody unless they're getting out of hand and interrupting or anything like that. I don't see that that's a problem, and in other places like the Sunshine Task Force, they don't mute anybody for the whole meeting. So there's no need for hands up, hands down, unmute, mute, and so on and so forth. I think you should certainly strongly consider that, particularly since you have so very, very few participants. And I think that the complexity of the instructions actually is a turnoff and a complexification that is not necessary, and a discouragement and even a block to the public and its participation. Thank you very much. I would certainly like to hear some discussion about this. And again, there's another mention of opportunity for members of the public to address this body under the further resolved section. I think you need to look at both the complexity and generally how you're operating to allow the public to provide public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Operations, are there any other commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are no additional commenters in the queue currently. We'll pause a moment to allow additional commenters to raise their hands by pressing *3 or pressing the raise hand button in Webex. And it looks like there are currently no more commenters, Madam President.
Thank you. And hearing that there's none, the general comment on this particular item is now closed. So I'm going to move this into discussion with the fellow commissioners. And I happen to be on a smaller screen than I'm used to being on. And so just bear with me as I toggle between the various documents that I have open here. One of the things I'm going to do is that I'm going to be looking for commissioners who have any comment and or discussion on this particular item. And so I'm going to be carefully looking for you, but just know that I'm on a smaller screen than I normally am. I usually have a much larger one. And so if you have your hand up and I don't see you, please alert me. Just change my layout here so I can see everyone. Are there any commissioners that would like to comment on this item? Okay, hearing that there are no commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the resolution as stated?
I move to adopt this resolution as stated. This is Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Wolf.
This is Commissioner Ono, I second.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the resolution, and we have a second. The first one was by Commissioner Wolf, and the second was by Commissioner Ono. What I will do now is that I will take roll call, and I will call those that are the remaining commissioners. And when you hear your name, say aye or no as I go through. Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
And who's the remaining commissioner? If you could help me, City Librarian? City Librarian, I can't see everyone. I'm so sorry. Who's the remaining commissioners?
Perhaps Margot could help us with the roll call.
May I chime in? I believe Commissioner Mall. Did we get Commissioner Mall?
Yes, that's what. Commissioner Mall? Commissioner Mall?
Madam President, I don't see her in my...
I see her. I think she's muted though.
Let me unmute.
There we go. Commissioner Mall?
Commissioner Mall, we're saying aye or no? Can you say it again for the record?
Aye.
Thank you so much. So let the record, and then Commissioner Wardell Garaduzzi is an aye. So all those, the resolution passes. And I want to say thank you for all of you bearing with me as I'm not able to see your faces this time on the small screen that I am on, but let the record show that the resolution has passed. Thank you very much for your assistance as well to the library personnel. So now we're going to move on to the second item of our agenda, which is general public comment. Operations, are there any commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there is currently one commenter in the queue.
Thank you. Would you put the commenter through, please?
Yes. Anonymous call-in user 15, your 3 minutes begins now.
Is that me?
Yes, it is. Please.
Okay, I'll start the timer. You didn't ask for public comment. You asked if anybody was on the line. That's contrary to the instructions here, and it's confusing. This is Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association, Library Users 2004 at yahoo.com, and P.O. Box 170544, San Francisco, California, 94117-0544. Just a note, I provide these methods of contacting us because in a real-world meeting, it would be very easy for us to go up to anybody else who made a public comment, or for them to come up to us and possibly make contact. We agree, we disagree, let's have a cup of coffee, and to be able to make contact in that way so as to share some ideas at a public meeting and beyond. So I think those are important things, and I would ask you to include them every time in the minutes. With respect to general public comment, number one, I went to some Mission Branch Library presentations, which I only knew about because somebody who knew about them informed me. There was no indication on either day, nor to my knowledge prior, that there would be any kind of a meeting about the Mission Branch renovation, which is almost $25 million worth. And it's a major branch and a major collection and a major piece of our system. There was nothing online. There was no notification by mail. There was nothing in any branch that I visited or the main library indicating any such thing was happening. And I think that's very wrong. You're basically keeping it a secret. Essentially, there was also no mention at the Library Commission of any specific time, date or time that this was going to happen, as far as I recall. Second, with respect to the design, I'm very concerned, as I think I've said at the meetings, that at least one of the meetings, that the primacy, the centrality of the librarians has been diminished. And the wonderful central staircase where you rise into the light and then into a beautiful big room, that has mostly been restored, but you end up facing a wall, and above it a piece of art, but the librarians are off to one side. If something should happen on the stairs, as a matter of safety, as any kind of a matter, and as a matter of welcome, we're here to help, the libraries have been shoved aside to a peripheral location. I'm also in general concerned about reopening issues. The fact that only half of the libraries, 3 months before 2 years is up, only half the libraries have 7-day service, the other half have 5 days, and those have no weekends or just one weekend day, and those also have 0 evenings as you had before COVID. That's a very serious problem.
3 minutes.
Should be remedied. Thank you.
Thank you for your operations. Are there any other commenters in the queue?
No, Madam President, there are no other commenters in the queue at this time.
Let's just wait a moment to see if anyone else shows up.
Doesn't look like there are any more commenters, Madam President.
Okay, hearing that there's none, General comment on this item is closed. So we're going to move on now to our third item, which is a budget review. It's a 2-year budget cycle for fiscal year 23 and 24. And explanatory documents are provided for you on that SFPL Library Commission webpage, sfpl.org. And we'll be having a discussion on our budget priorities. This is not the first discussion, but it is a continuing one at this time. And this is only a discussion item. We will not be taking action today. So I'll turn it over to our city librarian.
Thank you, President Wardell, and good evening, Commissioners. Heather Green, our Chief Financial Officer, will take the lead in presenting this budget presentation. Heather?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, evening. Pleasure to be here before you, and thank you for having me. Let's get to it. It's budget season. Next slide, please. This slide gives context for the overall budget process. President Wardell Garducci, as you just mentioned, Commissioners, you'll recall the city does a 2-year budgeting process on a fiscal year ending June 30, and we're planning here for fiscals 23 and 24. The library's budget is what they call an open 2-year budget, which means we plan for 2 years on an annual basis. So whatever we decide for year 2 this year, we revisit next go around. We have the same timing expected as last year, which is we're meeting today just the day after Mayor's budget instructions were delivered yesterday afternoon to the CFOs. We don't have anything in the slides here today because we just didn't have the information when it was time to publish. I'll try to make a note or two. But we will document all the keynotes and numbers in the January deck. But we should all remember it's from the Mayor's office and Controller that we get our bottom line for the Library Preservation Fund, which is, the lion's share of our revenue source. And that helps us to produce scenarios, which again, you'll see in January. So we did get a rough cut from the Controller's office this morning. Thank you to budget team there. And I can say at least that it looks like good news. You may have seen the headlines about the good news for the overall city's budget, which is great. That's mostly a change in the out years picture from prior outlooks at this stage in the year anyway. But, it's still good news for the library. No cuts to our bottom line. A small increase in fiscal 23 over what we had budgeted last cycle, plus about between $700,000 and $800,000, and then a bigger jump in fiscal 24. But that bigger, fuller picture you will see in full next time. And this time we will be sharing on department budget proposals that have come through so far this fall. I also just want to flag right up top, and I'll say it again, as part of the overall process, there are a couple of rather large unknowns that we expect will stay with us through department phase. One of these happens all the time. That's our department work order agreement. So some of these are centrally loaded, and we just need to reserve some capacity to be able to deal with cost increases to centrally delivered services from departments like the Department of Human Resources, the Department of Technology, and so on. And then there's also some unknowns around our major capital projects, which I'll come back to in a little bit. Next slide. This shows the overall calendar. I'm on slide 3 or slide 11 on the master deck. You'll see this yellow arrow for commission budget discussions is not a 1-month arrow, it's a 3-month arrow. You'll have items on this in January and February as well, and we are required to have at least 2 public discussions of our budget, and we'll have 3 at least. We appreciate your input as we work to develop the budget that will best serve the library's patrons and San Francisco more broadly. Department phase ends around President's Day, and then it goes to the Mayor's Budget Office for analysis, back and forth questions, making sure everything is cleanly loaded. Mayor's phase ends June 1, at which point the board picks it up. There's a new budget system this year, and this year the board analyst will be able to see in March what everyone has loaded. That's just mostly back of the house process improvement for us, but I'm excited on behalf of our office. We get questions in from the board's budget and legislative analysts. We answer their questions in June, reframe priorities to be responsive to the priorities of the Budget and Appropriations Committee chair, who always sends a letter asking for presentations to be made, responsive to X or Y theme, and make line adjustments as directed. The board is done at the end of June, at which point it goes back to the mayor for signing in late July or early August. Next slide. This FY23 uses by division and cost category is a reminder of where we're starting here in fiscal 23, where our biggest areas of spending are expected. Public services between the branches in Maine make up about 36% of our budget. It's mostly labor and some materials and supplies. Collections and technical services as a division includes both the labor and the materials. If you look at the table on the right, you can see that of the 30.81 for collections and technical services, about 70% of that is for the collections themselves. It's 21.76 million in fiscal 23. About 10.3 million of that is budgeted toward the electronic collections, and a little more than that to physical collections and materials and supplies. And there's some software costs and other delivery type expenses. And then facilities is another major area of spending for us, especially when you factor in our capital projects. This is what it takes to keep our buildings in good condition. Remember, we have 28 library outlets plus 2 administrative facilities, looking at a little more than $1 million per year per facility, including the major capital investments. The capital component here includes the 2.5 million we put towards Chinatown and the 2.5 million we put towards Ocean View last cycle per recommendation of commission. And we will be revisiting those needs cycle. But again, we'll do that more in January with the benefit of a bottom line to work towards. Next slide. The ring. Here you see the familiar strategic priorities in this ring graphic. We look forward to updating these, but meanwhile, we're working with what we have. I've also noted here a ground up list. So just to highlight, we have our premier urban library as a guiding North Star. Components of that include promoting literacy initiatives that promote literacy and learning, youth engagement, organizational excellence, digital strategies, taking care of our facilities and infrastructure, and partnering for excellence. And then I've also noted here just a list of, this is kind of a ground up derived list of what emerged as our annual priorities based on what we saw coming through in budget proposals. We have budget proposals that specifically seek to advance racial equity, and those overlap in some cases with proposals to enhance digital access, but I drew a line between those mostly to fit things nicely on 2 slides. There are a number of capital and facilities related proposals and also proposals to right size our operations in ongoing lines that carry from year to year. Those are like the business as usual lines, you might say. On the horizon, but not yet captured in the slides to follow, I just want to mention briefly the fourth, it was recently announced, the Children and Families Recovery Plan. That's you may have seen a press release about that in the news. That's an effort being led by the Department of Children, Youth, and Families at the behest of the mayor. SFPL has been involved in the planning and preparation for that plan through conversations with DCYF leadership, and we are currently working with them and to think about some strategies SFPL can put forward to be responsive to this call for city agencies to deliver what San Francisco's children and families need most in recovery from the pandemic. Plan, where the work is still to come on implementation, but the timing is good for the budget cycle from the citywide perspective. So we're really excited about that. Next slide. So the next 4 slides will address our proposals in those buckets. These are recommended budget proposals to date. In support of racial equity at the San Francisco Public Library, there is $200,000 for collections acquisitions, specifically of BIPOC authors, with a focus in fiscal 23 on building out our circulating collection based on selected titles and authors in the African American Center. And SFPL would plan to disperse these books to branches to increase visibility. Likewise, SFPL proposes to strengthen the Native American collection in the Maine and the branches to fulfill our promise to the Native American Cultural District to increase our holdings of books by and about Native Americans. And also we plan to increase purchasing in international languages collections to repair the diminished spending during the pandemic and also cover the increase in shipping costs post-pandemic. In following years, there's an ongoing investment in following years. We would focus on Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, Latinx authors and materials so that we strengthen our BIPOC representation. Also, $500,000 proposed, again, an ongoing investment to augment our successful book giveaways programs. This would go to a combination of the Scholars at Home program, Everybody Reads, and Summer Together. Everybody Reads, the partnership with the Human Rights Commission, and Summer Together, the partnership with TCYF, so that each of these programs is funded at $400,000 plus, as we learned well this summer, $100,000 for the costs associated with preparation and distribution. Those are not minor considerations, doing all that, getting everything together and where it needs to be. There's $75,000 to the City Librarian's Office for facilitation services to support trust building, innovation, and collaborative problem solving within SFPL. And then you'll recall that SFPL is in the midst of hiring a dedicated racial equity manager. There's a $300,000 proposal in contracts as a placeholder so that the person, when hired, would have some resources ready to go in fiscal 23 to deliver special projects and initiatives through contracts. The alternative would be to wait until they're hired and then got to wait another cycle. So we're trying to get ahead. And then lastly, we have our open hours assessment required, and that analysis will help SFPL to continue to refine our service model so that we are meeting the highest patron needs in an equitable way. Next slide. On the digital access front, there's $200,000 investment proposed in assistive technology for the Talking Books and Braille Center. $100,000 of that is a one-time equipment refresh, and then $100,000 is for ongoing services for technical support. A $95,000 investment in 5G connectivity for the bookmobiles. So those can be mobile hotspots, better support staff, but also deliver that Wi-Fi service on the bookmobiles wherever they go. For the DigiCenter, we already had $50,000 programmed for one-time investments and $50,000 in an ongoing budget. So that's what you see in the first column of numbers there. These proposed investments of $48,000 in one-time funds and $25,000 ongoing to enable an update of the digital assets management system, DAMS, and expand capacity for digitizing archives and right-size the ongoing budget. And then the big ticket item on this slide, which is arranged alphabetically, is e-collections. So the largest line item here, this would grow the e-media materials budget by 5% in fiscal 23 to meet demand. Our CTS wizards tell us that e-media circulation grew 34% last fiscal year, and clearly there's been, a shift in user patterns. Lastly, two lines that will help us continue to deliver virtual and hybrid programming to retain the audience we found during the pandemic. And the first is $60,000 for a kit of an equipment setup for camera, mics, laptops, et cetera, to grow capacity to be able to deliver more events at once or in more locations. And then $83,000 ongoing would support the Zoom licenses and event registration software that makes those events seamless. Next slide. All right, capital and facilities. So apologies to open up here with some TBD lines, but we are trying to hammer out the details of the needs in the first two lines, which are about replacing our security cameras on the underlying server there and the security card reader. Originally, we were planning to do just the cameras. Last couple of months, we've realized the underlying server is failing, and also the security card reader system can be connected to those. So it could be one project. We are hammering out the details. You'll see a number there next time. In all, we're looking at, upper bound as much as $500,000, but I'm still sorting through whether that's the right number. The renewals line here, so it's like some capital planning lingo. Renewals are when you fix something that's broken, bring it back to restore its useful life rather than, enhancing above and beyond. And so the renewals lines here are all basically state of good repair towards our facilities, seeding funds to be able to meet the highest needs at the branches in Maine, as facilities assessments proceed, and those are conducted on a rolling basis. The biggest line item amongst the renewals is for a specific known project, the Park Branch exterior. You can see just one branch's major repairs can be quite expensive. And so that speaks to the importance of seeding these renewal programs so that when a project comes together, we have a solid start on funds. And we don't have to hold up needed repairs for funding purposes. And then lastly, here is our facilities truck replacement. We tried for this last year. It wasn't approved. The approvals for vehicles are centrally controlled by the fleet and mayor's office. So we'll try again. The truck is old. I think it's going on 20 years. Not on this slide are major capital projects. You'll hear more about those in January, recommended funding levels for those. But to note, we have Mission. We know we have a budget gap there. You heard about that in September. And then Chinatown and Ocean View, trying to work with the information we do have. And you can expect to see scenarios tied to variable investments in those projects. Next. Lastly, what we need for our ongoing operations, you've been hearing me say right sizing for some time now. So just trying to get what we need to run smoothly. There's a request for professional services to support the development of an information governance policy through the city librarian's office. Some sister city agencies have done this and will help us be in compliance with city policies. There are several IT lines here for cloud hosting innovative libraries to mitigate any service issues related to aging, underperforming servers, and unexpected outages. It's a good disaster readiness investment because it would enable more rapid service restoration in a major event. $22,000 to purchase personalized library notifications integrated with our ILS. And one-time investments to ensure IT has what it needs in the network switches and server refresh lines. And then finally, we had, obviously operations were disrupted during the pandemic. Some expenditure lines in materials and supplies were cut slightly in a one-time way or in some cases in an ongoing way. And here we're restoring for supplies for admin, branches, delivery services, custodial in the stockroom, and uniforms for custodial delivery services and security. Next slide. Okay, that brings us to our next steps. So we'll be digesting the budget instructions, working with our baseline data, and then refining budget proposals in light of those targets for January's commission meeting. And there you'll have a chance to see scenarios. And then in February, in past years, we have done an action item that first week of February. We usually have 2 meetings in February, the 1st and 3rd Thursdays. We'll be targeting that first meeting again for action from commission to enable us to load everything that we need to load in the budget system timely and without crazy stress, if that's okay. And that brings me to the end. I think there's a thank you on the next slide, but happy here for questions, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Heather, for such a good presentation. I know that there'll be some commentary later, but before we go into that, we're going to move into our public comment on this item, the budget review over this 2-year period, 23 and 24. So operations, are there any commenters in the queue?
Yes, Madam President, there's currently one commenter in the queue.
Thank you. Would you put the commenter through, please?
Yes. Anonymous call-in user 15, your 3 minutes begins now.
Can you hear me? I don't recall hearing that I'm unmuted. Hello?
You are unmuted. Thank you. We can hear you.
Thank you. Can you give me a 30-second warning? My timer isn't functioning. Is that a yes or a no, please?
30-second warning is not part of the procedure.
Not procedure.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Peter Warfield here, Executive Director of Library Users Association, Library Users 2004 at yahoo.com, and P.O. Box 170544, San Francisco, California, 94117-0544. I think it's fair when you have in real life a countdown clock right in front of people's face so that at any moment they can see how much time they have left, that you at least give some sense of what the time passage is when people make public comment, especially when they're on the phone. With respect to the budget, I'm very concerned about money for books, and particularly what seems to be a trend that has never been discussed at the Library Commission, and that is the replacement of physical books by e-books only. There are more and more titles, it seems, that are available only in e-books. And sure, you can say there's a trend toward more and more reading of e-books. Yes, well, when that's more and more what you offer with no alternative, surely that's going to be the likely outcome. This cuts out people who do not have access to computer and internet, don't have good access to it, and that means minorities, poorer people, older people, those with not good English, and so on. And that's true for your money for public relations. Where is your money to give free and equal access to information about the library's increasing openness, for the library's programs? You give everything to email people and nothing to people on mail. In 1 3/4 years, I am on the mailing list. I've gotten 3 postcards, and a colleague of mine says she has gotten 1. And that goes for a whole range of other things like your programs. I'd like to see definite money put on mailers, put on informing people that those Zoom programs are accessible by phone, and to see how to access those programs, just like you put information on your agenda. The capital project, how about service to the public from, for example, the Mission Branch, which will be closed as to physical location for 4 years? That's atrocious service. What about current newspapers and periodicals? Many of those are way out of date and very old as the latest ones. Are you saying my time's up?
Yes.
3 minutes.
Operations, are there any other commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are no additional commenters in the queue currently. I'll pause a moment to allow additional commenters to raise their hands by pressing *3 or pressing the raise hand button in Webex. And Madam President, there are currently no more commenters.
Okay, hearing that there are none in the queue, public comment on this item is now closed. Okay, commissioners, this is a discussion item. And I just want you to know, even though I can't see your faces, I was able to open it up, the interface, so I can see your hands when they're raised. So if you have a comment on item number 3, the budget, Heather is here, as well as our city librarian. You can have them as resources to answer any questions or comments that you have at this time. So I'm just monitoring to see if there's any hands that are raised. And in the event you were having some difficulties, as I was earlier with some technical difficulties, if you wanted to just alert me that you like to speak, you could just unmute yourself.
Madam President, I see Commissioner Ono has her hand raised.
Okay, wonderful. Commissioner Ono, would you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to thank Heather for all the work. I know that the budget office didn't come through in a timely manner. Getting the notice yesterday and getting more information again today is such a stressful situation for you, especially towards the end of the year. And I know you've been working very hard. I do appreciate the presentation, and I don't have any further questions at this time. I will leave it up to my fellow commissioners that have more knowledge than I do about budgeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, we live in the budget office's world. It's their world. We're just operating in it. So it was not unexpected, and we'll have time to process.
Thank you, Commissioner Ono, for that comment. Any other comments or questions at this time? For Heather or our city librarian? This will not be Heather's last presentation to us. She began the process for the public that are joining us that may not have been with us this whole time. She began the process of helping us to understand what this 2-year budget cycle might entail nearly 3 months ago, and has been carefully keeping us up to speed, just really building each presentation upon the next, but always covering the information that she covered in the last one. And so what I appreciate very much about Heather's process is that it's very informative, first of all, and she communicates this information in a way that is helpful for those of us that has backgrounds in the areas of municipal budgets, as well as of us that do not have backgrounds. And so, Heather, I just want to continue to thank you. And I just wanted to show put it for the record that the way in which you have provided this presentation to the public is very commendable, and it's very inclusive. And it is very educational as well. So I just want to say thank you. And that's part of the reason why you're probably not seeing a lot of comments or questions, because she has been educating us as well as the public along the way. So we don't get a bunch of information 1 or 2 times and we're just trying to digest it. We've been digesting this information over some months. So thank you so much for your ongoing good service. And we know that we're going to be moving into an approval sometime in the early part of the winter. So we'll be looking for that as this item continues to come back on our agenda.
Thank you. I want to say thank you so much for the kind words. That means a lot to me. I care a lot about budget because it's the direction we go in, and just to tie it just to get you even more excited, like the mayor's priorities, are so good for the city. She's talking about restoring vibrancy, making sure we stay focused on recovery of our economy, but also of our people, reprioritizing our funding to improve core service delivery, and accountability and equity in our programming services and spending. So, the library is a part of that, and those ambitions are so noble. And, I feel very fortunate to have set the ball rolling this time around. And this is my last, I know what you meant. It's not your last budget proposal, but it is my last presentation to you. I'm going to be stepping down from this role, as I think all in commission know. And it's just been a tremendous pleasure working with you all. And you're in the best possible CFO hands with Maureen, who will be acting. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for your service to the city and county of San Francisco, to the patrons of the San Francisco Public Library, and to serving the San Francisco Public Library Commission in such an honorable and integrous way. Thank you, and we wish you the best in your next endeavors, Heather.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on now to item number 4 of our agenda. This is we're going to have a presentation on our Talking Books and Braille renovation. And there's explanatory documents that goes along with this presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our city librarian.
Thank you, President Wardell. I'm very pleased to introduce our next presenter this evening. Irene Aquino is the project architect from the Public Works Department, and I see that she is joined this evening by her colleagues from Public Works, Lourdes Garcia and Julia Lowy. And we're delighted to share the design drawings for a major renovation of our Talking Books and Braille Center on the 2nd floor of the main library. Tonight's presentation is a significant milestone that represents the culmination of years of engagement with the community and Public Works distillation of the aspirations that we've heard from our patrons, the advocates, and the Talking Books and Braille Center staff. Without further ado, Irene, take it away.
Irene, you
Hello?
may need to yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. And my camera. Okay. Yep. Yes. So good evening. I am Irene Aquino with the San Francisco Public Works Bureau of Architecture, BOA. Tom Fortin, the Chief of Maine, was to join me tonight, but unfortunately, Tom will not be present. Next slide, please. I will be presenting the Talking Books and Braille Center, also known as TBBC, which is at the Main Library. Next slide, please. TBBC is located near the entrance of the Larkin Street exit on the second floor. The image on the left is a photo of the current entrance to the space. The image on the right is the interior view of TBBC. As with other patron services and centers in the Main Library, the Talking Books and Braille Center's service model has been evolving in recent years toward a more community-centered approach, where staff and patron engagement requires more flexible space to celebrate coming together and learning and engaging in participatory programming, while still providing access to audiobooks, items in Braille, and computers with assistive technology. Recognizing this dynamic and working as a cooperative library within the network of the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled at the Library of Congress, also known as NLS, the TBBC looks forward to the planned renovation of our space. Next slide, please. Design goals to reflect updated TBBC service model. After meetings with TBBC staff, the TBBC Advisory Committee, and patrons, the plans provide new flexible spaces for patron service, programs, peer learning, and access to assistive technology. Specifically of note, the remodel will improve acoustics and personal space, enhance wayfinding methods, foster interactions among patrons, and build community with an open floor plan. Our new approach is supported by the current NLS service model, which focuses less on shelving pre-recorded audiobook cartridges and more on staff working with patrons as readers, advisors, and downloading requested audiobooks online and onto re-recordable cartridges. Next slide, please. Design reference process. A Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, BVI, is a specialty project. It is a space that embraces universal design, but improves on accessibility by providing great emphasis on sight and sound. Many of the users rely on sound to circulate through the environment, for example. Therefore, it is important that sound interference from multiple sources be kept at a minimum to avoid distraction. Acoustic control is a very important design aspect in BVI spaces. For BOA, the Bureau of Architecture, to design a center that successfully addresses the needs of the BVI community, we prepared ourselves by completing the following. We consulted with Chris Downey, an architect, well known for his architectural work for the BVI community. Chris was the backbone of our design. He provided our team with an overview of the BVI design experience, what we should try to achieve, why is it important, and reviewed our schemes for effectiveness. We also collaborated with the TBBC staff and the TBBC Advisory Committee to understand their needs to improve the services offered. We toured the recently constructed Lighthouse for the Blind on Market Street. Lighthouse is considered a world-class resource for the BVI community. The interior architecture was truly designed to emphasize the experience of the blind by both obvious and subtle features. The Bureau of Architecture with the aid of Chris Downey, implemented much of the same techniques at TBBC. Next slide, please. Here is the proposed floor and furniture plan. The shaded area represents the area of work. For your reference, north is the top of the page. Once you enter through the set of double doors at the bridge, you will immediately be greeted at the new welcome desk, which is located just east of the doors. Moving straight ahead from the entrance is an open area, which is surrounded by bookshelves and is furnished with tables and chairs. That's located center on your plan. This area is meant to be flexible and change according to the various programs offered. The furniture and bookshelves are on casters so that they can be moved as needed. Rooms flank either side of this open area. On the west, there are 2 assistive technology rooms, which are existing, and they're noted as private computer rooms on the plan, and a new large alcove in between the 2 rooms. There, a reference desk will be located. The assistive technology rooms will be updated with acoustical wall treatment. On the east side of the open area, a new pure learning room is proposed. This is noted as tech room on the plan. The pure learning room will be outfitted with a display monitor, computers and desks, a meeting table, seating, and acoustical wall and ceiling panels. At the windows on the north elevation, new alcove seating will be provided at each bay. There is an isolated braille embosser room adjacent to the welcome desk. The embosser itself is very loud when in operation. Therefore, we work closely with our acoustic consultant to mitigate the sound transfer out of the room. For example, the door will have seals and gaskets to prevent sound leakage. Acoustical panels will be applied to the walls and ceiling for sound absorption. And the embosser itself will sit on a padded table to reduce sound transference. Next slide, please. Here we are showing the various flooring treatments that will be provided. You can see that there are many styles for the space. We have 3 types of resilient tile and 1 carpet. This is just an example of how we work closely with Chris Downey, who advised that all areas with different function should be treated differently. This allows the users to understand that there is a change in function, and therefore they should expect change. Tactile cues and different sounds of the flooring will be noticeable when tapping and walking. We also added floor transition strips between the various flooring as an aid to help the users transition from one function to the next. As you can see on the plan, there are borders around the different flooring types. These represent the transition strips and will feel and sound differently when tapped. Next slide, please. This is just the first of 3 renderings of the proposed space that we will share with you today. This is a view of one standing by the welcome desk and looking towards the 2 assistive learning rooms and large central alcove. You can see the open space in the center. The furniture is on casters and can be moved as needed to accommodate various programs. The furniture color is omitted from the renderings as we are still finalizing the FF&E. Next slide, please. Here, we are looking towards the new pure learning room. The glazed sliding doors allows visual connection between that space and the open area. And here you can also see the various floor treatments used to aid the public. Next slide, please. In this last rendering, we see the pure learning room again, but now we can also see the welcome desk on the right-hand side of the entrance. Okay, next slide. The TBBC schedule. 100% CDs are complete. We just received permit approval from DBI on December 2nd. For 100% FF&E bid documents, I have a typo, and please excuse me for that. The anticipated completion for that is January 2022, not 2021. And we are currently awaiting the construction estimate, and then we will proceed to construction, which is anticipated in February of next year. Next slide, please. Here we show the estimated costs for the project. This project has two scopes of work. The standard design and construction package is estimated at $1,393,000, and the furniture, fixtures, and equipment FF&E package is estimated at $240,000. Next slide. Thank you to all the TBBC and library staff who have supported the planning efforts. Especially, we would like to thank Jane Glasby and Marty Goddard, now both retired. And we welcome Michelle Waddy as the new TBBC program manager who will lead services during the temporary closure for the renovation, when we can continue with the remote services so expertly delivered during the COVID shutdown. We will also continue with our library by mail services and continue providing access to assistive technology, AT, with a temporary computer setup in the Deaf Services Center where staff are familiar with AT computers. And we look forward to welcoming patrons back into TBBC when the renovation is completed in 2022. Next slide, please. I would like to acknowledge our talented team of dedicated designers, architects, and engineers at San Francisco Public Works. Our architects, Lourdes Garcia, Iara Bachman, Sanfi Gay, Udit Wadalasi. Mechanical engineers, Kent Min, Dan Criswell Baltazar, and electrical engineers, Jenny Chan and Thundar Ai. Inspired by the challenges of designing the space for the blind and visually impaired, the team collaborated and worked well together to find solutions for the design. I believe everyone was excited to work on this project because of the unique complexities presented. Next slide. TBBC could not be successful without the aid and advice from our specialty consultants. Chris Downey has a wealth of experience and knowledge in how to properly provide effective and thoughtful spaces for the blind and visually impaired. We are very thankful for his guidance and direction. We would like to thank Roman Walk and Jenny Solheim of Papademos for their acoustic input and recommendations. TBBC is certainly not like any other program, and Papademos' guidance on acoustic design is invaluable. And next slide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Irene. And I just want to thank you and all of our Public Works colleagues for shepherding us through this design process. The end product is amazing, and it really is a testament to the City and County of San Francisco's commitment to equity and accessibility for our visually impaired and blind patrons. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you as well, but I know that this is going to be an item that the commission will want to be in discussion and have maybe some questions and or comments for you, Irene. So if you can just hang on tight for that portion of our item as we go into the public comment on this item at this time. Operations, are there any callers in the queue?
Yes, Madam President, there are currently 3 commenters in the queue.
Wonderful. Will you please put the first one through, please?
Yes. Anonymous call-in user 15, your 3 minutes begins now.
Yes, this is Peter Warfield. I had hoped that there would be others, perhaps closer to this project, who might comment first. I don't think we've had very much discussion at all at the commission, and now it's already looks like it's completed with respect to the design. I would ask, how long has this been in planning? I'm very concerned whether users were solicited in the design reference process on page 5. It looks like experts were at least consulted in some fashion. I see worked with TBBC staff patrons and the advisory committee. In the past, when we've had, for example, user comments at meetings, for example, for the branch library improvement program, there were prepared write-ups, if you like, minutes of meetings that showed what were people concerned with. Certainly on a project like this, I would ask what problems were there that staff and management at the library were aware of, but also what were problems that users found with the existing space, and what were their wishes with respect to what they would want for improvements or enhancements. And I don't see anything like that. I don't see any documentation from users, for example, as to what they would like to see, what problems you could solve, and so on. There was also a point at which I heard, and I'm not an expert in this, but that it sounds like there's a model of going towards, instead of ability of people to help themselves, to talking books, which are special tapes and so on and so forth, that now the direction is to get folks assistance from staff to get then online materials. And I'm very concerned in general, as a library user myself, and knowing how many other people would like, they would like to be able to browse and look on their own. They would like to do things on their own. Partly it's a matter of privacy, but partly it's also a matter of how much time would I be imposing on somebody. When you're browsing on your own, you can take as long as you like. You can try out things and then go back to the shelf and try something else or sample something. So I'm very concerned about that aspect of the service. I'm certainly interested to hear what library users have to think, and I think it would be very appropriate to have documentation about what that might have obtained for the designers. And we're spending $1.5 million. That seems to me basic. Consult the users. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comment. Operations, would you put through the next commenter?
Yes, Madam President. Anonymous call-in user 17, your 3 minutes starts now.
Hello, are you there?
Oh, hello. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I'm Mike Downing. I'm a relatively new committee member, and my comments today are in support of the Talking Books and Braille Center. I've been encouraged to watch as the planning and design phases have moved forward. I am fully sighted, but my parents were both blind. Other than Braille books, there were few library services available to my father during the years before he passed away in the early 70s. Subsequently, it was exciting to watch over the many pre-internet years as just the availability of talking books provided my mother endless hours of music, literature, and cookbooks and everything else. She was a lifelong teacher for the blind as well as a former committee president, and she advocated tirelessly for continuing library services. I know that Mom would be so excited to be involved in this great opportunity. Lastly, I just want to comment on the location. Without a doubt, this centrally located center with countless facility benefits and easy access to Muni and BART will encourage library patrons for years to come. In addition to the other committee members, I give my enthusiastic endorsement to the library and look forward to the grand day when the doors open wide. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Operations, would you put the next commenter through, please?
Yes, Madam President. Anonymous call-in user 18, your 3 minutes begins now.
My name is Charlie Doris. I'm Vice President of the Talking Book and Braille Center Advisory Committee. The committee began advocating for a renovated TBBC in 2013, and that included meeting numerous times with San Francisco Public Library staff, TBBC staff, about what was the best way of creating a space that was usable for most patrons. And this included, our work included focus group interviews with patrons as well. All along the way, the staff, both past and present, of the SFPL and TBBC were on board on this project, and it is to their great credit that we have reached this point. The new renovated TBBC will be a central portion or a central part of the disability community in San Francisco. It will allow the library to better serve or better meet the traditional role of a library, which is to be a source of information, entertainment, and job search information, to name just a few. In addition, the renovated library will be a refuge from the isolation that a disability tends to create in a person. For example, the tech room, the learning center, which I think is a very good name for it, will be a place where it'll be large enough for meetings to be held, book club meetings to be held. It will be quite impressive, and it will be very important to bring people into the library. The advisory committee looks forward to the renovation being completed next year, and it will be a showplace that everyone can take great pride in. And again, we really do thank all of the staff and the consultants at the library and in the rest of San Francisco public system for all of their work. This has been a long time coming. It is going to be quite impressive, and I think the patrons will be very impressed with the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Operations, are there any further commenters in the queue?
Yes, Madam President, there are 2 commenters in the queue.
Thank you so much. Would you put the next one through, please?
Yes, of course. Anonymous call-in user 20, your 3 minutes begins now.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Schopmeyer. I'm the Visual Impairment Services Team Coordinator at the San Francisco VA Healthcare System. And I would just like to tell you how impressed I am with the project. I've recently joined the advisory committee for the TBBC, and I look forward to introducing the veterans in my care to this space as a room for community and meeting other people. And it's not just for people with visual impairments, but also with multiple disabilities that I know who will take advantage of this space. So I'm looking forward to the opening of this space and introducing the veterans that I know who live in San Francisco who would greatly benefit from the services that you provide there. So thank you for all the effort, and I just want to say that this is a wonderful addition to this library.
Thank you so much. Operations, would you put the next caller through, please?
Yes, Madam President. Anonymous call-in user 22, your 3 minutes begins now.
This is California Speech-to-Speech CA9094F with a message, and the caller's message is, hello, I am Ivana Kirola. a member of the advisory committee for the Talking Books and Braille Center, and I have two concerns. Tonight, I wanted to comment on the rebuild project and say I am specifically concerned about contrast and stationary furniture being provided. I have these concerns because I use a wheelchair and am legally blind. My second concern is about hiring a new access manager that has experience working with people with disabilities in learning settings. As always, thank you for your attention.
We thank you for that public comment. Operations, are there any further commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are no additional commenters in the queue currently. Pause a moment to allow additional commenters to raise their hands by pressing *3 or pressing the raise hand button in Webex. All right, Madam President, I don't see any additional commenters at this time.
Okay, hearing that there are no commenters in the queue, the public comment on this item is now closed. So I want to thank the public for a robust set of comments on this item. And as we move into our commission discussion, we have both Irene Aquino from the San Francisco Public Works, who just really gave us a very comprehensive and I think a very lovely overview of the beginning of the project to where they are at this particular time. And Irene, just want to make sure you're available for the commissioners who may have questions for you or comments. And it appears that I see Commissioner Ono, who has hand is raised, and I see Commissioner Lee. And I'm going to begin with Commissioner Ono. If you would unmute yourself, and then we'll go into Commissioner Lee after that.
Thank you very much. Like you, Mary, I appreciate Irene for your presentation, but also for all of the public comments. I'm really glad to hear so many of the advisory committee members speak up in support of the project. And I do hope we address the concerns of Ivana, as she had mentioned. But I know this has been a long project and long overdue. And so I'm waiting to see next year in 2022 to visit the remodeled and new TBBC. I really appreciate that you hired or you worked with a good consultant, not only on the design, but also on the acoustics. We really, that was very caring and very thoughtful of the committee and for Public Works. So thank you all who participated on this, and we appreciate everything you're doing and look forward to next year. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Ono. Commissioner Lee, if you would unmute yourself at this time.
Yes, I'm happy to see that there is a renovation on the design. I understand that with the library, many projects actually use design thinking. So my first question is whether this particular project also adopt the design thinking. So that is question number one. And question number two is that with if indeed the design thinking is actually used and continue to be used, how many of the users would continue with the project? And question number three is I echo Commissioner Ono's statement and Ivana's statement, is that whether her concerns were addressed in the process. And if so, perhaps you can shed some light on that.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lee. And I would say at a high level, yes, service design concepts and principles were employed in the design process. The Talking Books and Braille Center Advisory Committee, they have been important stakeholders throughout this process as we considered the user experience. Their stakeholder engagement and feedback have been central to the design process, and their thoughts, their aspirations have been incorporated throughout. And just the fact that we have a dedicated, committed group of advocates in the Talking Books and Braille Center Advisory Committee, that will allow us to continue that engagement and continue to refine the space. As you heard this evening, the design is flexible. It's going to make for a more open and airy environment. The furnishings are on casters, so the space can be easily transformed depending on the function or the use. And I'll just pause there, and our architect, Irene Aquino, can offer additional insights.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, that is correct. The furniture will be on casters so that they can be moved around as needed according to the various programs that TBBC will be offering. There was a question about contrast. So what we did when we proposed our flooring types, if you recall from the rendering, we presented those to Chris Downey first. And so what he did is he had to make sure that there was enough visual contrast so that the users, and there's varying degrees of blindness, can be able to navigate through the space properly. It's the same that we're doing as we are going through our finishes for the furniture. We are reviewing it with Chris Downey to get the okay to make sure that the colors that we are presenting can be noticeable and evident to the users. So we are providing a high level of contrast for the finishes presented in the space.
Thank you, Irene. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Lee.
In part, it does. I'm just wondering whether the committee members, any one of them, are visually impaired, so that, because, for example, in my case, I'm not that visually impaired, but I know that I wouldn't have the experience to share as a user.
Yes, the Talking Books and Braille Center Advisory Committee is made up of stakeholders in the community that also patronize the programs and services of this space.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lee. Vice President Huang, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just really wanted to make a short comment, which is that we always are so proud to be able to work with an institution that takes such great care to go the extra mile and get every single detail right. And it's so clear through the presentation, but then also the public comment that you've done that. So thank you. We love supporting you in every way that we can. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Dr. Lopez, could you unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I want to echo what my fellow commissioners have said. I do have a question, and that's regarding capacity in terms of the room itself. Like, I know that looking at the model, there will be some rooms. Would you say in terms of people that could be engaged, and can you give us a number, and then so that's one of the questions in terms of capacity, how many people can we accommodate within the space, we hope that it's used and then that it's used frequently and that there's, a lot of patrons. So I was just curious about that. I don't know if you have that information, if you don't, we can get it later. But I was just curious. But other than that, I have to say that the project sounds great. You have taken in consideration so many factors, and you have so many experts in the committee. So I'm looking forward to see the project develop and continue. And so that was my only question and my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lopez.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, a question about occupancy.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the question, Dr. Lopez. When I look at the proposed floor plans for the upper main floor on page 6 of the presentation, I count approximately 30 seats, but our project architect, Irene Aquino, could probably provide more specificity.
Hi, yeah, I don't actually have, we have an actual occupant load factor. I don't have the drawings in front of me. So I can forward that to you. But based on the number of people allowed in the rooms, I think that was one of your questions as well, besides overall. The two assistive learning rooms, those are the existing rooms. That's basically one person in there. And that's the function is like a person and a computer. So that's more of a private type of learning room. Whereas the tech room or the pure learning room, we can have at least 8 people seated, being 4 at a desk and a computer, and then 4 at a central meeting table. And then I will look up the occupant load that is approved by permit for the space, and I could forward that on.
Thank you, Irene.
Irene, I'm sorry, I just have a follow-up question as well.
Sure.
For the space, are there any children spaces that are going to be dedicated? If they're younger folks, they will need, oftentimes they have a companion chaperone. So I was wondering if what will be the capacity for the younger generation, or not the younger age,
for children and adolescents.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so on our floor plan, there is a section that's devoted to children's collection. And in terms of collections, that's looking at 3 bookshelves or 3 bookcases. So it's the entire shelf to hold the collection. And adjacent to that area, there's a large table with chairs and smaller seats known as poofs. If you're familiar, they're just kind of like a stool, and they're small, so that easily can allow the children to sit as well. And those are movable; they can be moved around, however necessary. But that we do, and we have planned for a children's collection space at TBBC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lopez, for those very thoughtful questions about not only how many people can use them and its capacity, but thinking about the intergenerational needs of persons with visual impairs and or blind. And so very thoughtful to remember that it is a intergenerational space for a community that has these needs: educational, learning, engagement, and as the members of the public said, even entertainment needs. And so, thank you for bringing that forward. Are there any other commissioner comments and/or questions? I'm monitoring this, and I just want to make sure that I haven't overlooked anyone. So I'm going to say, Irene, you have done a really wonderful job of just acknowledging everyone that has been a part of this in your formal presentation, which is a part of the record for the San Francisco Library Commission meeting. And I also want to thank the members of the public who commented and also added not only names of people, but just to affirm what this means. One of the comments, there were so many comments that were so important, but the one that really just stood out to me was one of the members of the public had said that this is a central part of engagement for the San Francisco disability community, and went on to say that this space, this TBBC Center, becomes a refuge from those who sometimes experience isolation. That it could be related to their blindness and/or visual impairedness. And so this work is really important. I call it centering individuals' humanity, that we see people in regard to what their needs are, and that we support them in ways that they need to be supported. And so I just want to say thank you so much, Irene, for just the work that you're doing. Please send our regards, my regards as the president of the Library Commission, to your fellow coworkers and Department of Public Works, as well as with the other consultants and others that you are working with, that we are beyond ecstatic of and how this project has moved forward. You heard directly yourself how important this is to the community. You heard it in their own words. And please just pass on to all the colleagues that you're working with that we are very delighted in how this project is moving forward.
So much.
All right, thank you. So at this time, we are going to move on to item number 5, which is our city librarian's report. And this is the item where City Librarian Lambert reports on recent library activities and makes announcements. And today we're going to have an update on the SFPL reopening, digital asset management system, and the Poetry and Light Festival.
Thank you so much, President Wardell, and good evening again, commissioners and members of the public. We have a number of reports this evening, and I'm pleased to introduce our first presenter, our Chief of Branches, Kathy Del Neo. She has an update on our reopening efforts. Kathy?
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, commissioners, members of the public, and colleagues. My name is Kathy Del Neo. I'm the Chief of Branches for the San Francisco Public Library. I really appreciate this opportunity to share a branch library reopening update with you. Next slide, please. We are nearly at the end of 2021, so this is a good opportunity to take a look back at all that we've accomplished this year. If you'll recall, at this time last year, we were providing SFPL to go front door service at 11 branches, and we had community hubs in 6 of our library branches. At this time last year, roughly 1/3 of our branch staff were still deployed as disaster service workers. While the branch division had a number of vacant positions, hiring was really at a standstill throughout the city. We've come so far. Today, we are providing service to the public at all 27 of our neighborhood branch libraries, and we are eagerly awaiting the return of our division's final 2 disaster service workers, Ana Yamashiro and Michiru Kotobuki, who will resume their normal work at the Ocean View and Presidio branches on January 1st. We resumed hiring public service staff in July of this year, and many SFPL staff have had opportunities to reassign and promote within the library. We've also brought a lot of new colleagues on board to SFPL. The branch division is continuing to work hand in hand with Library Human Resources to fill the vacant positions in our division. Next slide, please. In 2021, 14 of our branches expanded to 7-day-a-week service. This slide includes the names of all of those branches that now provide service every day of the week, including in the evening. Most recently, on November 13th, we restored 7-day service at our Anza, North Beach, Ortega, Park, Parkside, Richmond, West Portal, and Western Addition branches. And I'm happy to share that on December 4th, the loud noises at the Marina branch stopped, and we were able to reopen that branch on that day to 7-day service. I just want to thank all of the staff who made this possible at all of the locations, and particularly the Marina staff who said basically that they wanted to be home for the holidays, and they were really excited to get back in there and open up their branch in December. Next slide, please. Our team in the branch division is in the final stages of preparing to launch 7-day service at our Bayview, Chinatown, Mission Bay, Potrero, Portola, Presidio, and Sunset branches on January 8th. Next slide. As I shared earlier, we're continuing to work closely with our colleagues in Library Human Resources to fill vacant positions that we still have in the division so that we have the staffing to support 7-day service in all of our communities. Our plan is to restore 7-day service at Excelsior, Glen Park, Golden Gate Valley, Ingleside, Noe Valley, and Visitation Valley branches early in 2022. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to share that we are continuing to provide SFPL to go service to the Mission community Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And we're also providing bookmobile service on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturday afternoons. These services enable patrons to pick up hold materials and also maintain browsing access to both Spanish and English language materials from the Mission branch's collection on the bookmobile. We will continue providing this service at the Mission branch at 300 Bartlett Street until we open a temporary site in the Mission. And we are continuing to work closely with the Department of Real Estate to identify an appropriate space for this temporary service. When the new temporary site is ready, we will close down service at the Mission branch on Bartlett Street so that the Mission staff and collections can move to the new temporary site for the duration of the renovation of the Mission branch, which we anticipate will take roughly 2 years. I want to reiterate that we are committed to opening a temporary Mission branch 7 days a week and with evening hours. At the temporary site, our community will be able to pick up holds, browse popular Spanish and English language materials, access public computers, and get help from the skilled and dedicated Mission branch library staff. I'm pleased to share that I had the opportunity to meet directly with the patrons of the Mission branch at 2 community meetings that we hosted the first week of December, and we'll host a third meeting online with the Mission community. That meeting will take place on January 6th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. The upcoming virtual meeting is listed on the Mission Lift renovation webpage and also on the library's online calendar. As we did for the prior meetings, we'll continue to prioritize bilingual communications to patrons in the Mission branch service area and send those patrons bilingual email blasts. We'll also distribute bilingual flyers at our SFPL to go and bookmobile service points to promote awareness of the meeting in the community and make sure that the community members' voices are heard. This event will also be promoted, the upcoming event on January 6th will also be promoted in our At the Library publication, so all library users will be able to know about it. I really appreciate this opportunity to provide you with an update on our reopening progress, and all of us in the branch division appreciate your continued support. I'll be available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Next slide, please. All right, next up, I'm pleased to introduce Dee Dee Kramer, the manager of our Digi Center on the 5th floor of the main library. Dee Dee will be presenting about our digital asset management system. Dee Dee?
Thank you, Michael. Can you all hear me? Great.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, evening. My name is Dee Dee Kramer. I'm SFPL's Digi Center manager, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the library's new digital asset management system, digitalsf.org. Next slide, please. Here's the detailed shot of the front page of the website. You'll notice that the square in the middle, the banner, says San Francisco Public Library Digital Collections. Next slide, please. And here you may be thinking, but I already get ebooks, movies, and music from the SFPL website. Those are digital collections, right? And yes, you would be right, but most of those things, which are commonly called e-collections, are popular materials the library licenses. The digital asset management system, or DAMS, is for what we own and for what we steward, the stuff of our civic and cultural memory, historical photographs, maps, oral histories, manuscripts, audiovisual records, and formats that have yet to be invented. As a public library system that includes the official city archives and significant local history collections, and that also serves as a federal, state, and local government depository, SFPL is responsible for a growing body of primary source materials and official documents. These materials are often unique and sometimes fragile, with long-term research value. E-collections and digital collections are both important, but because digital collections are unique, no other library has what we have. That is why it is critical to preserve them and to make them available to everyone. Next slide, please. So a digital asset management system, or DAMS for short, stores, shares, and organizes our digital collections. We use something called Islandora, which is an open source framework of software tools as our DAMS. Islandora is widely used by a community of archives and libraries around the world. Drupal, Fedora, and Solar are software components of that Islandora system. Drupal is the website aspect. Fedora is the backend repository where the digital assets are stored with their accompanying metadata that explains what they are. And Solar, the search index and database software that makes it all discoverable by the public and by the staff, I should say. Next slide, please. So SFPL has been digitizing historical photographs and other archives and special collections items since 1998. It all started with our old San Francisco historical photographs database, pictured here at the bottom of the slide. And those 45,657 photographs are now also on digital SF. Before the DAMS, besides the photo database, people had to visit multiple outside sites to get to our digital collections. Now SFPL has its own site with an underlying digital repository to preserve our master copies, and we can and do still contribute these digital collections to the partner sites, such as Internet Archive, or the University of California's Calisphere, or the Digital Public Library of America. Next slide, please. Here's an example from something you can find on the DAMS currently. It's a piece of an oral history project from the 1970s called Afro-Americans in San Francisco Prior to World War II, which was co-sponsored by the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library and the African American Historical and Cultural Society. What you see on the slide is a scanned page from an oral history transcript next to an audio clip that's digitized from a cassette tape of the interview with someone named Elizabeth Fisher Gordon, who was one of 25 of the oral history interviewee subjects. Next slide, please. Another thing that distinguishes digital collections from e-collections is that many of our digital collections get digitized via grant funding. So right before the pandemic, the James C. Hormel LGBTQIA Center received a Preserving LGBTQ History grant from the California State Library to digitize a handful of different collections that had some physical fragility and or high request rates. So we're slated to publish that material on Digital SF next spring. And that project will include Harvey Milk's speeches, a 1950s era scrapbook about a local police raid on a lesbian bar called Tommy's Place, and a subsequent court case against the owner and scrapbook keeper, Grace Miller, a set of photo albums created by someone named Lee Raymond, who in today's times would probably have a very active Instagram and TikTok account. Color snapshots compiled by Bill Giddings, who was owner of Bradley's Corner Bar in Coal Valley in the 70s and 80s, and photo negatives from the SFPD documenting sites of vice investigations beginning in the 40s and going through the 1960s. So wide range of. Next slide, please. So a digital asset management system is software that helps people manage their digital collections. And I want to end this presentation emphasizing the people. Digital collections management involves multiple departments. You can see here the Digi Center, Government Information Center, Cataloging Department, IT, and the San Francisco History Center Book Art Special Collections Department. These multiple departments have an ongoing commitment to keeping the documentary traces of our past and present alive so that they can be enjoyed and included in our future. Next slide, please. So I want to say thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate it, and I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership, Dee Dee. Next slide, please. All right, finally, our closer today is Michelle Jeffers, the Chief of Community Programs and Partnerships. She has a presentation about the Poetry and Light Festival held in Golden Gate Park. Michelle?
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Michelle Jeffers, Chief of Community Programs and Partnerships. And indeed, I am here to tell you about a new programming partnership we have this month called the Altarverse that's bringing poetry, music, and light to the dark days of December at San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. The project was initiated by Illuminate SF, the San Francisco-based nonprofit behind a number of the city's magical and iconic public light art installations, as well as San Francisco Poet Laureate Tonga Wisen-Martin. Although this is just the first year, the purpose is to transform the city each December ongoing with family-friendly, free public performances of poetry, music, and light, and that we hope draw people from around the city to this outdoor space that is open to all. The Altarverse, it's in the historic Spreckles Temple of Music Concourse, which is also known as the band shell to most of us. And it's a complement to the Winter Lights event in Golden Gate Park, which is a combination of free, safe, family-friendly after dark experiences. Those include things like the McLaren Holiday Tree and a series of illuminated installations like Entwined by Charles Gadkin and Peacock Meadow at the park, Photosynthesis, which is by Illuminate on the Conservatory of Flowers, and special ambient lighting among the trees and ferns of the park. Next slide, please. The Altarverse programming began on December 1st with a poetry celebration for World AIDS Day that featured poets James Siegel, Greg Pond, and former poet laureate Kim Shuck. The library, our team, is participating as a program partner and a curator for the Altarverse projects. And we put together the first Friday event of the year on December 3rd. It was a tribute to the 4 San Francisco poet laureates that the city lost over the past year: Diane DePrima, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Janice Miracatani, and Jack Hirschman. I have to say that losing all of those geniuses of poetry in one year was a lot to bear, and we felt it was really important to have some way to bring our existing poet laureates together to honor them. So again, each of the living San Francisco poets laureates, past and present, Devorah Major, Alejandro Murguia, Kim Shuck, and Tonga Wisen-Martin, paid tribute to one of the poets we had lost by reciting their poems and sharing poetry they wrote that was inspired by those poets. During the performances, the DeYoung Museum facade was also projected with the poetry of the poet being honored. And as each laureate took the stage to read, a colored beam of light was shot 10 miles into the air in commemoration of the poets we lost. I'm proud to note that this is one of the first library programs that I can recall that required FAA clearance. Next slide, please. The performances continue all month long, mostly every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. But this being poets, there are some Thursdays and some Saturdays sprinkled in there as well. The Sunday performances are dedicated to youth and family-friendly poetry. So upcoming includes a public program this Saturday of cathartic howling that also commemorates Allen Ginsberg's masterpiece, Howl. And there will be some howling at the full moon and some music by Moon Alice. And then this Sunday, the Oakland Youth Poet Laureate finalists from the past 6 years will take the stage. Also coming up is a celebration of poet June Jordan on the 22nd and a Kwanzaa celebration with Moad on December 26th, among many other events. You can find the full schedule on our website and at thealtarverse.org. Next slide, please. I just wanted to take a minute to shout out the many partner organizations involved in making this project come to light, which include San Francisco Rec and Parks, Chapter 510, the 826 Valencia Foundation, the DeYoung Museum, and the California Academy of Sciences, the National AIDS Memorial, 16500, the Parks Alliance, and of course, Friends of San Francisco Public Library, and also the many poets and musicians who are taking the stage to be part of this celebration. So thank you for your time. That concludes my presentation on the Altarverse.
Thank you, Michelle. And I want to congratulate you on organizing this amazing tribute to the poet laureates. Hearing our revolutionary poet and current San Francisco poet, Congo Eisen Martin, recite his poetry with the musical accompaniment, it was the most memorable recitation of poetry I've ever heard in my life. And it was an amazing event. And I want to thank all the staff that presented this evening. That concludes the final City Librarians Report for 2021. And I just want to say it's been a pleasure to serve with all the staff and you commissioners this past year. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a fruitful report. But before we go into our commission discussion and or questions on these items, we're going to go into our public comment on this agenda item. So operations, are there any commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are currently no commenters in the queue.
Just wait a moment and pause to see, give people a chance. They may have been listening to that riveting report. Give them an opportunity to catch up with their technology and dial in.
Yeah, and I see we have one caller in the queue, Madam President.
Thank you. Would you put the caller through, please?
Of course. Anonymous call-in user 15. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Peter Warfield here, Executive Director, Library Users Association. Library Users 2004 at yahoo.com and P.O. Box 170544, San Francisco, California, 94117-0544. First of all, thank you for the reports. And some comments. First of all, apparently none of the reports, nor the president of the Library Commission, nor the city librarian, have heard of a high-tech invention called page numbers, which are handy for those of us on the phone to see what it is you're talking about. So that's for starters. Let's go in order. First of all, the branch library reopening update. We have, unfortunately, extremely slow updates, but even so, we are being cheated on hours that we had prior to COVID. You are discriminating basically against people who need the evening and weekend hours. The branches that are open 5 days have either 0 weekend days or just 1 weekend day. All the hours are during the day. For the 7-day folks, there are evening hours, but they've been cut back. So whenever we hear from 9 o'clock to 8 o'clock closures by and large, when we hear about 7-day access restored and when we hear all these details, we're not hearing about how the evening hours, which have always been the most in demand by the patrons, those are being cut and cut and cut. There are other issues that I've mentioned before, such as the pushing out, apparently, by digital books of non-digital ones. With respect to digital SF, we often hear about the benefits, and I certainly wouldn't argue with most of the benefits, but we can't even run our basic computer systems knowledgeably. IT apparently doesn't believe in providing documentation, instructions, or instruction for the staff. When the first copy and computer systems went in, there were times when I was the one who had to tell somebody how to make a copy because the staff didn't know and apparently hadn't gotten any training. I tried for an hour to get just the library's homepage copied, and multiple librarians couldn't get anything for me other than an approximation of what it looked like in bits and pieces. So I'm very troubled by what's going to happen with respect to access if it's all behind a complex computerized system. finally, with respect to the Altarverse, where's the publicity? We heard what it was online on the library's website and at the Altarverse website. What about people who do not have access? You're discriminating against minorities, poorer people, etc.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Operations, are there other commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are no additional commenters in the queue currently. I'll pause a moment to allow additional commenters to raise their hands by pressing *3 or pressing the raise hand button in Webex. I don't see any additional commenters, Madam President.
Thank you. Operations, hearing that there's none, public comment on this item is now closed. So let's move into our commission discussion on the city librarian's report. I want to thank Kathy Dineo, Dee Kramer, and Michelle Jeffers, who all provided very good reports in this, and all three of them are available. And I'm going to go to the commissioners right now. I'm monitoring the participants, looking for any commissioners who may have raised their hand. And if Commissioner Wolf, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. This is my favorite part of the meeting. And I just wanted to say at the end of this extraordinary year, 2021, San Francisco Public Librarian, Chief Librarian Michael, you have just done such an amazing job leading the team. The entire team has been incredibly resourceful, getting the branches up to speed and open. I've been using different branches and really enjoying going in and seeing activities happening. I know there are staffing challenges and other kinds of challenges in addition to COVID that prevent us from being fully open in every way we want, but I think the trajectory has been very extraordinary and very impressive. So I just want to thank you for Kathy and your team for all that you have done. And Michelle, you and your team always just kind of make things happen so beautifully, eloquently, and so powerfully. So thank you for all you've done this year, and what a great culmination in the project you talked about with the poet laureates. Really appreciate that, and marking the passing of so many important voices that have fueled so many of us over the years. And Dee Dee, I just am in awe of what you have to do and how you do it, because you never end. That project never ends because technology upgrades everything. And so I just appreciate the care and deliberations you and your team make to ensure that those resources remain resources and don't go down the track of falling into old technology that no one can access anymore. So I appreciate also understanding the distinction between the digital collections and the e-collections. That was very helpful to me in my not being so tech savvy, but I appreciated that. So I just wanted to take a moment at the end of 2021 to thank the leadership, every single member of the team, who contributed to making 2021 a banner year despite so many challenges. And here's wishing you a nice holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf, for those very, very thoughtful comments. I'm checking to see if there's any other commissioners that have either a question and or comment for these leaders of the SFPL that are here today, that particularly the ones that contributed to the city librarian's report.
Connie did a great summary of all of our thoughts, I think.
Okay, that was Commissioner Ono, let the record show, that she had an affirmative comment as well. And I will just add to that. I think that both Commissioner Ono, but particularly Commissioner Wolf, just really said, I think, what the Commission's sentiment is about this work. Really extraordinary, considering the times that we have been in. A banner year for an extraordinarily unusual year. And how does one pull that off when there is no book to tell you how to do it? There's no guide. There is no instructions to tell you how to create an engaging as well as informative and educational opportunities through the various 3 areas, whether it's through the branches that Kathy leads, the ability to make these treasures, both municipal and city treasures, available through electronic means, as Dee Dee and her team does, or the way that Michelle's team just kind of makes magic and creates events that anyone in the community can engage in kind of the depth of the magic making. These things are definitely are not things that these leaders had any instruction manual on how to do, but they did it and with their leadership team somehow. And so I just want to just thank you all, and thank you for the rest of the SFPL, and thank you, Michael, for just the leadership that you've provided, because this type of imagination could not have emerged without a leader that sees the best in people and allows them to be their best. So I want to thank you for that very excellent, among other excellent city librarian reports as our final one for this calendar year. So we're now going to move into our next item, which is the approval of the minutes for November 18th, 2021. This is an actionable item that must take action on behalf of the commission. But before we go into that, we're going to move into our public comment on this item. And so I'm going to ask operations if there are any commenters in the queue.
Yes, Madam President, there's one commenter in the queue.
Thank you. Would you put the commenter through, please?
Yes, of course. Anonymous call-in user 15, your 3 minutes begins now.
This is Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association, Library Users 2004 at yahoo.com. Also, P.O. Box 170544, San Francisco, California, 94117-0544. These minutes are actually quite shocking. In particular, you seem to be having a silencing of any criticism of Facebook. On item number 4, approval of the minutes, I commented that I had talked for a full minute out of my 3 minutes about Facebook, about the recent hearings at the Senate, about how Facebook was, according to the testimony and documents, harms children. It puts profits over safety, and the library should not be touting Facebook as it does repeatedly, including in its At the Library monthly document for the public. You have completely ignored that, and the one-liner, not even a full line you've given me on approval of the minutes comment, is Peter Warfield said he had several issues with the minutes. That's your summary of what I said. I also asked about a 30-second warning. Didn't get an answer. Virtual meetings, inferior to live meetings, and you should seriously consider returning to live meetings. I also requested that the meetings be scheduled later regarding the schedule because that way more people, presumably who are working, going to school, and so on, can participate. None of this was included in these comments at all. With respect to general public comment, I said that public comment has gotten extremely complicated. There are still errors in the instructions. Services need to be dealt with promptly to get them back to what they used to be in a variety of ways. I've asked for inclusion of my contact information for Library Users Association, which I give now every time that I speak. I was talking about almost no evening hours for all the openings that you've had, and of course, we're glad you're opening more, but those need to be restored because there are almost, well, they've been cut, and cut. Long waits for books, no reference copies of new and popular books. Those were specific unstaffed desks. All those things were specific things. There was more on public comment with respect to questions about what is Scholars at Home, what is city grants for CBOs, how are you pushing out books, physical books with electronic books, and so on. None of that detail is in here, and it should be. Thank you.
Minutes.
Operations, are there any other commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are no additional commenters in the queue currently. I'll just pause a moment to allow any additional commenters to raise their hand by pressing *3 or pressing the raise hand button in Webex. I don't see any additional commenters at this time, Madam President.
Okay, hearing that there are no commenters in the queue, public comment on this item is now closed. Commissioners, is there any discussion on the minutes of November 18th, 2021? Monitoring, I do not see any hands up to make any comments or about any discussion on the minutes. Is there a commissioner who would like to make a motion?
This is Commissioner Ono. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a commissioner who would like to second Commissioner Ono's motion?
I'd like to second. This is Commissioner Huang.
Thank you. Let the record show Commissioner Ono has made the motion and Vice President Huang has seconded. I'm going to now call the remaining commissioners by your name. And when you hear your name, say aye or no. This is to approve the minutes. Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Mall? Commissioner Mall, if you could take yourself off of mute.
This is Margot. Commissioner Mall had to drop off the meeting.
Thank you so much, our Commission Secretary Margot Schraub. So let the record show that Commissioner Mall is not present at the time of this motion roll call. And I'm the remaining commissioner and mine is aye. So let the record show that Commissioner Wardell Garaduzzi has said aye. We have a unanimous motion to approve the minutes of November 18th, 2021. So the motion passes. So we will now move on to the final item of our agenda, which is the adjournment. This obviously is an actionable item for the commission. And at this time, I'd like to call us into our final public comment of the evening. Operations, are there any commenters in the queue?
Don't see any commenters in the queue at this time, Madam President.
So,
oh, we have one now. I'll unmute them now.
thank you. Thank you. Would you put our commenters through, please?
Yes, of course. Anonymous call-in user 15, your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you very much. That was very peculiar. I tried pressing *3 multiple times and did not hear anything until I paused and then pressed *3 and heard the system message that you've been unmuted. That was rather disturbing that there was no response to multiple pressings of *3, just so you know. This is Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association, Library Users 2004 at yahoo.com, and P.O. Box 170544, San Francisco, California, 94117-0544. Well, I said this before, and I'll say it again, but I'll add something to it, and that is the library is undergoing a lot of changes, including a lot of new programs, new directions. You've got $170 million plus to spend, in your budget. And it's hard to believe that with all of you being the intelligent people that you are, and the representatives of the public, presumably on this commission, that there wouldn't be anything at all that any one of you would like to see on a future agenda. In the past, you did that. You had an item where you could say what you would like to see on a future agenda. Many bodies do that currently as a routine matter. Things may come up during the meeting, issues may come up, problems may come up, good things may come up. You might want to report on something. You might want more detail on something. You might want to praise something that you heard a little bit about or experienced at the library. The idea that nobody would have anything, meeting after meeting after meeting, to say that they would like to have on a future agenda is really actually quite stunning. And it seems to me of rather a disappointment with respect to representing San Francisco's public. $170 million and no interest in anything to be on a future agenda? As I said, that seems quite stunning. I think you should not adjourn until you insist that this be an item on every agenda, as it used to be and is on many bodies, things that the library commissioners would like to see on future agendas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Operations, are there any further commenters in the queue?
Madam President, there are no additional commenters in the queue.
Okay. Hearing that there are none, this final public comment is now closed. So, commissioners, we have our adjournment before us. Is there a commissioner who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. That the record showed that Vice President Huang made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second. This is Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf. Record show that she's made the second. For the remaining, I will call you by your name. Say aye or no when you hear your name. Commissioner Ono.
Aye.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
And let the record show aye for myself, Commissioner Wardell Garaduzzi. And so the motion to adjourn passes unanimously. So this has been a very fruitful meeting. A lot of good information, a lot of important information. It has been such a full year, and so we ended with so much fullness as well. And it has, like I said earlier, has been a year like none other. But nonetheless, the San Francisco Public Library continues to shine brighter and bolder, and continues to set the path for other libraries across the United States. So thank you so much to the patrons who are still here online, or the ones who will watch this at a later time. Thank you for all the members of the public, as well as the members of the San Francisco Public Library who are here, and the ones who are not here. And again, we just want to, as my fellow commissioners have said, want to lift up our city librarian, Michael Lambert, for leading us in a banner year, even when we had a year where we had no instructions on how to lead during a pandemic. So thank you for your leadership during this year of pandemic and ongoing pandemic. And I also want to thank my fellow commissioners, Vice President Huang, Commissioner Lee, Commissioner Ono, Commissioner Wolf, Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner Mall, in her absence at this point. Thank you all for the way that you've shown up. It has been an unusual year for us. We prefer to be at the main, at the Correct Auditorium. We don't even think that Commissioner Lopez has even had the opportunity to be with us in that Correct Auditorium. So we haven't had a chance to even have her physically there with us. And so there's been so much that that we're longing for to be in community again. But I want to say that even in this unusual time of remote access of doing public meetings, you still have served, and you served with diligence, you served with curiosity, and you served with care. So I just want to thank all the commissioners who are here tonight, as well as the one that's no longer here, for your ongoing service to the city and county of San Francisco, and to the patrons of the San Francisco Public Library. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you for your attendance tonight.